without any further ado, Leon Neto.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meyer, for the kind introduction. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here tonight. It's a pleasure being here. And this is the topic of my 3-article dissertation. And since this is the very first one, at least here in the Shenandoah Observatory, I thought I could start with giving you an idea about the structure. And before I start, if you were thinking about pursuing a 3-article dissertation because you think it's easier than a full dissertation, let me burst your bubble right now. It is not. In some sense, it might be even more difficult, but I don't regret that. I think it was worth it. But this is the basic structure of it. We have the first 3 chapters, chapter 1, 2, and 3, Introduction, Literature Review, and Methodology. They are comprehensive chapters about all 3 articles. And then we have all 3 articles one by one and a final discussion and conclusion section. I would like to start talking about our target population, contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders. Who are them? They are religious singers who perform contemporary Christian music in the context of a contemporary church service through music and congregational singing. The main difference between contemporary Christian singers, or CCS, and worship leaders, or WL, is that CCS are professional traveling artists, usually performing in theaters and gymnasiums, but in terms of style and vocal production, both categories are basically the same. It is important to differentiate these singers from gospel singers. Contemporary Christian music started in the late 1960s with the folk-like songs of the Jesus movement. The first Christian artists had little connections to the music industry, but in the early 1980s, large record labels started to show some interest in contemporary Christian music. Less than 10 years later, contemporary Christian music was established as a viable segment of the market, and since then has been steadily growing in audience and economic relevance. Contemporary Christian music is today one of the top-selling music categories. Praise and worship style, or PEW, is the preferred music style for contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders. Woods describes the style as comfortable range, vocal expectations appropriate to congregational singing, and melodies that move well for amateur singers rather than being soloistic. Based on our preliminary findings, it is possible to suggest 3 factors regarding our target population. 1. CCS-WLs is a growing population of singers. 2. CCS-WL is a population that is potentially at risk for vocal problems. And 3rd, the voice community may have an incomplete understanding of their needs and stylistic demands. The overall intention of this 3-article dissertation was to investigate the vocal risks that these singers face and the vocal skills that these singers must possess to achieve commercial success. I investigated this population of singers through the following 3 studies. This is the first one, it's the title, and this article has been accepted for publication and is currently available as an in-press article in the Journal of Voice website. CCS-WL are an under-researched subset of contemporary commercial music, or CCM singers, and therefore we do not know their specific vocal risks and their level of vocal hygiene awareness. If we do not address this dearth of knowledge, a potentially at-risk population of singers will remain underserved by the voice community and may experience unnecessarily high rates of vocal pathology as a result. The purpose of this self-quantitative study was to investigate the prevalence of vocal symptoms and pathologies in contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders, and the level of their vocal hygiene awareness. These were the research questions you can see on the screen. Our methodology, we used a quantitative study approach, a self-report survey, a descriptive study, and as subjects or participants, all contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders of any level, 18 years old or older, were accepted. The questionnaire was available in English and was additionally translated into Spanish and Portuguese by certified translators. This is how the questionnaire was designed. Part 1, background and demographic questions. Part 2, vocal characteristics. And Part 3, vocal hygiene and vocal health. The results, we had 614 participants geographically distributed, as you can see on the screens. Approximately 66% were male and 34% female. 329 participants identified themselves as professional, CCS or WL, either full-time or part-time. The majority of the participants perform primarily in churches and use sound reinforcement regularly when singing. 52% of the participants identified themselves as self-taught, and 29.8% reported private study, which would be private lessons, but not in a college context, not for academic purposes. 11.2% of the respondents have a bachelor's degree in worship, and 2.6% have a master's degree in worship. The majority of the participants described their voices as normal and reported being happy with their vocal quality, either always or almost always. Vocal fatigue was the most prevalent vocal symptom. This result is consistent with Dawson's findings, in which 34.3% of the participants reported vocal fatigue or loss of voice. Dawson's study is a study in a small population of Australian contemporary Christian singers. These symptoms are associated with prolonged speaking and singing at high intensities. This type of demanding voice use is frequently seen in contemporary worship services, where over 90% of the participants perform regularly. Participants reported having a sore throat sometimes, almost always, and always, in a total of 44.6% of the responses. Sore throat is a vague but commonly used term in the singing voice community to describe generalized discomfort in the vocal mechanism. The subjectivity of the term and its lack of specificity is an unavoidable limitation of this study. Further investigation may specify what participants mean when reporting a sore throat. Only 4.4% of the respondents were diagnosed by an ear, nose, and throat physician or ENT physician with vocal nodules. 10.7% were diagnosed with laryngitis and 4.4% with other vocal pathologies combined. Although this low occurrence may suggest a healthy population, these data need to be evaluated with care. Nodules and cysts may be initially asymptomatic and therefore underdiagnosed. As with other CCM performers, these singers typically do not seek medical help for their voice, and this might be another factor. The vocal symptoms reported by this population may point to undiagnosed vocal pathologies, though a positive diagnosis of vocal pathology can only be made by direct observation of the vocal folds. Such symptoms include a tickling or choking sensation, loss of upper range, and strained voice. Future research, including stroboscopic screening of CCS and WL at workshops and conferences, may help clarify these preliminary findings. Awareness of vocal hygiene principles was low. Proper hydration is important for optimal vocal performance, but only a small percentage of the participants drink water regularly. Vocal warm-up is considered essential for singers, but 34% of the participants reported that they do not warm up their voices prior to performing, and 27.9% warm up for only 5 minutes, an amount of time that might be insufficient in some cases. Reflux disorders are a common concern for singers. The term laryngopharyngeal reflux, or LPR, is more precise, but it was not used in our study because it is less familiar to this population than acid reflux. Over 20% of the participants in our study reported a diagnosis of acid reflux. Lundy et al. Suggests that LPR is commonly found in singers and that it has been associated with factors such as eating late at night. It is therefore particularly concerning that over 60% of the participants in this study reported eating or drinking within 3 hours of going to bed. Throat clearing and strained voice can be indicative of reflux-related disorders and other health problems as well. Over 60% of the participants clear their throats either frequently or sometimes, and 28% reported having a strained voice, symptoms that are often present in LPR patients. However, some studies suggest that LPR may be overdiagnosed in the context of voice problems. Further investigation is needed to determine if throat clearing in our population is indicative of reflux-related disorders. The majority of this population have little to no formal instruction. A portion of the respondents reported more extensive music training, and you can see that in figure 1. However, only 11.2% have a bachelor's degree in worship, and 2.6% have a master's degree in worship, curricula theoretically designed specifically to train contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders. Our conclusions. Participants' familiarity with vocal hygiene principles was relatively low, as was their general level of voice training. Numerous vocal complaints, symptoms, and physician-diagnosed vocal pathologies were reported by contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders. The weakness of the study, the sample size of the respondents is not sufficiently robust to support generalizations of these results. And the further weakness of the study was that the questionnaire was only offered in 3 languages, potentially reducing participation from large CCS-WL populations in Asia and Africa. Future studies investigating the sound reinforcement used by contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders and the potential deleterious effects of non-CCM voice training of CCS and WL may serve to improve the care and training of this unique and growing population of singers. Our second study, and our second article is, this one is on the screen. Radionoff states that the training of contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders range greatly in terms of content and preparation. Dawson and Robinson found that most contemporary Christian singers do not receive adequate training for their unique vocal needs. The disconnect between what the singers require and how they are being trained may be due to the following factors. 1, CCS are a subset of CCM singers seldom studied, and a dedicated CCM-specific pedagogical approach is warranted. However, the majority of CCS-WL training is exclusively classical. Classical singing is acoustic singing, as we all know. Reinforced vocal resonance is vital for classical singers to be able to sing through orchestral and large ensemble accompaniment and fill large halls. While CCM singing is mostly electronically reinforced, each genre requires a style-specific technique. And 3, the majority of CCS voice teachers' awareness of the marketplace demands is probably poor. The voice community may be underserved in the needs of this population, and the lack of specialized voice training may prevent contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders from achieving their professional goals. In this context, music producers may provide valuable insight into what is commercially viable and what vocal characteristics are important for CCM singers seeking a professional career. The purpose statement. The purpose of this qualitative study is to investigate what music producers perceive to be the ideal vocal characteristics of commercially successful contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders. These were the research questions. And the methodology, we use a qualitative study approach with a code transcription analysis. And of course, our study was conducted in full compliance with Shenandoah University International Review Board policies and procedures. The criterion for our participants was defined as music producers specialized in contemporary Christian music and who have produced albums with Elite Dove or Grammy Award nominated contemporary Christian singers. These awards present their winners and nominees as the most representative and accomplished musicians in each category, conferring a label of acceptance and commercial success. Now, data collection. The specificity of our sampling criteria posed a problem to our study. We verified that only a reduced population of music producers actually fulfills our criteria. Expert sampling in that sense seemed to be the most viable method. We will call our participants as producer 1 P1, producer 2 P2, and P3. The first P1 was named by Professor O'Neill, was his former students who worked in Nashville for many years and was specialized in contemporary Christian singers. And P1 named P2 and P3, and I checked the credentials of both of them with P1 and P2 before proceeding to a P3 interview. Each participant took part in a 40-minute semi-structured interview. P1 and P2 were interviewed in person, and P3 was interviewed via Skype. For the 2 live interviews, we used Voice Record, which is a recording application for iPad, and for the Skype interview, we used MP3 Skype recorder software. Only the audio of all interviews was recorded. After the transcription, the interviews were peer-checked by my advisor and member-checked by all the participants. Each producer received a transcript of his or her interview and were asked to check if their ideas were accurately transcribed. The participants had a chance to delete, add, or change the transcript content. P1 and P2 did not have any corrections, and P3 sent a short list of typographical edits. After the transcription process, all interviews were thematically coded line by line. We coded and analyzed the interviews using the standard qualitative research software, the DUCE 7.1.3. We created 2 levels of codes: parent codes, which are over here, broader, easier to apply, defining major concepts that apply to the research questions, and children codes, over here, more detailed, nuanced, and harder to apply in reliable ways, but that help bring richness of content. To check the results, this is the code application. The pairing codes with the largest application were voice characteristics, CCS, which was a pairing code created to group the singers who were exemplars of the style named by the producers, training, vocal health, and artistry and expression. The children codes with the largest application were style, tone, recording experience, voice type, and range. After the coding process, we tried to identify keywords or themes in codes with occurrences in all 3 participants. starting with parent codes and then children codes. After this step, we try to group keywords and expressions with similar meaning in each one of the codes with occurrences in all participants. Keywords or themes relevant to the research questions and with occurrence in more than one participant were considered significant. For the participants in our study, the most striking vocal characteristic of contemporary Christian singers is relatability or approachability. The congregational, participative nature of praise and worship style may be the main reason for their assessment. The participants also try to distance contemporary Christian singers' voices from operatic, classical sounding voices, using terms such as contemporary, raw, familiar, doable, and even they don't need to have great voices. At the same time, the participants suggested that a CCS voice needs to have some kind of edge. This is a subjective term and poses some difficulties in terms of a definition. The participants seem to point differences in terms of vocal characteristics for male and female contemporary Christian singers. P3 was very specific, stating that male CCS voices should be primarily tenors. P3 described elite male CCS ranges as wide upper range and narrow lower range. P2 mentioned that male CCS should have some kind of authority in their voices. This comment may be related to the worship leading aspect of praise and worship repertoire. Female CCS voices, conversely, were mostly referred to as soft, whispered, or breathy tone. Of particular interest was the term angel voice. One of the P1 explained as if somebody was praying in your ears. P2 used the unexpected term sexy and sensuous to describe CCS female voices. Not about sex, he explained. It is possible to suggest a connection between what P1 said about an intimate sound with P2 comments on a sexy, sensuous voice. In terms of range, contrary to male CCS, female voices were described as normal range, C to C on the staff, or C to E. And P3 even mentioned altos or low sopranos air as the ideal voices for female CCS. All participants agree that stamina is a fundamental quality for CCS. P2 warned that the vocal load for CCS is likely heavy. It is debatable if vocal stamina is an innate quality or if it can be developed through training. CCS training, in any case, should be aware of the vocal load issues related to these singers. The participants stated that vocal hygiene awareness and appropriate practice regimen and dietary habits are necessary in order to withstand the heavy vocal load of recording and performances. For our participants, a CCS should be able to have a versatile voice and display stylistic diversity. These are also aspects that should be taken in consideration when developing contemporary Christian singers' training strategies. P1 mentioned that CCS students should be exposed to as many music styles as possible. Although this might be true for all vocal training styles, for CCS is particularly important since praise and worship is such a diverse, broad genre. In this sense, improvisation seems to be an important skill, as long as performed in praise and worship style. P3 mentioned that improvisation skills are important for CCS, but praise and worship improvisation is different than gospel and jazz, and that he does not know of any courses or schools that currently teach proper praise and worship improvisation. This is an area that needs further research and attention from voice pedagogues. According to the participants, in order to be employable, CCS need to have extensive recording experience and be comfortable in a recording studio, particularly when singing with headphones. The producers also mentioned that every minute in a recording session is important. Therefore, a CCS that can deliver good takes in a short period of time is a valuable asset. In the same sense, accuracy and good intonation are vital qualities for a CCS who wants to pursue a professional career. Our conclusion: music producers are rarely targeted for scientific studies. They are nonetheless a vital component of the music industry. By targeting this population, we gather data on an underserved and under-investigated population of singers. Our findings about the ideal vocal skills for a successful CCS may be able to help curricular development and teaching studio strategies with specific approaches for contemporary Christian singers. The heavy vocal load of CCS are exposed to in performances and recording sessions deserves attention from teaching studios and the vocal health community. Weaknesses of the study: we understand that the sample size was too small to support generalization. Expert sampling, however, tends to be smaller than most sampling methods due to strict criteria and specific technical needs. The level of expertise and the extensive experience of our participants working with elite, award-winning contemporary Christian singers may be able to add validity and relevance to our study. Future research on elite Christian singers' perspectives on the ideal vocal skills for their genre could further assist the development of specific style-oriented teaching strategies. The analysis of current CCS applied lessons curricula and insights from voice teachers specializing in contemporary Christian singers could also be potential topics for future research and would help the voice pedagogy community serve and prepare CCS more effectively for the marketplace. Studies on recording studio environmental conditions could also be beneficial to contemporary Christian singers, since our participants stated that professional CCS spend a good part of their careers working in these conditions. And the last study, the last article of this project, it's, as you can see on the screen, the problem statement. It is possible that there is a disconnect between what voice pedagogues, many of whom are exclusively trained in classical singing techniques, and contemporary Christian elite singers perceive as the ideal vocal characteristics of contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders. If we do not address this disconnect, voice teachers will teach contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders students techniques that would not be useful in the marketplace. The purpose of this study was to investigate the self-identified vocal skill set of commercially successful contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders. We obtained data through semi-structured interviews with 3 top-selling Christian artists, Dove or Grammy Award winners nominees with extensive experience and who are recognized as highly representative of their style. These were the research questions. The methodology for this present study was based on the previous study, with similar goals, targeting music producers specialized in contemporary Christian music. So we used the same semi-structured interviews, qualitative study approach, expert sampling, and code transcription analysis. The criteria for selecting the participants included that the participants were top-selling professional CCS, Dove, or Grammy Award winners or nominees. The Dove Award is the GMA, or Gospel Music Association Award. Is the most important award in the gospel and Christian music area. With extensive experience in the market and recognized as highly representative of the style. We selected our potential participants from data collected in the previous study of this dissertation. After gathering data from the cited study, we ranked the singers by the number of awards, either winners or nominated. Singers who were not nominated at least for one Grammy or Dove Award at the time of our study were not considered. We then proceeded with making contact with the singers according to the rank, starting with the highest to the lowest rank. And you can have a full description of our sampling protocol in the article. The singers were contacted via email, mostly through their official web pages. The singers who did not have an official web page were contacted via social media web pages. And like the previous study, we had semi-structured interviews. The interviews were a little shorter this time because they had one last question to answer, and they were interviewed either live via Skype or by phone with the same record systems, with the same protocol, member check and peer check, and also approved by Shenandoah University International Review Board. The analysis also followed the same protocol with using the same software, the DUCE 7.13, and peer check by my advisor. These are the parent and children codes, and you can notice it's pretty much the same, except that we don't have the CCS parent code here because they were not asked to name singers. The results, after contacting contemporary Christian singers according to our ranking, we received 4 responses. We identified the 3 singers with higher rankings and discarded the 4th one. So they'll be referred now from now on from singer 1, singer 2, and singer 3, S1, S2, S3. One of the CCS participants in our study is a Dove Award nominee, and the 2 others are multiple Grammy and Dove Award winners. One of the participants was interviewed by phone, one in person, and one by Skype. This is the code application. The pairing codes with the largest application were training, voice characteristics, artistry and expression, vocal technique, and vocal health. The children codes with largest application were style, classical training, range, tone, and repertoire selection. In general, the participants seem to suggest that contemporary Christian singers are singers with common, normal voices. The reason for this assessment may be related to the characteristic of praise and worship style. The simplicity of praise and worship repertoire is also reflected on why the participants described the range of CCS as closed and limited. In this sense, middle voices and not extreme voices would probably fit better the style. At the same time, the participants suggested that although CCS voices are ordinary and common, some kind of uniqueness is valued. S2 stated about an ideal CCS voice, a voice that cuts through the noise. It is difficult to make a conclusion about what the participants intended to say because these expressions are vague and subjective. However, it is possible to identify more specific examples of how this uniqueness can be expressed in CCS voices. S1, for instance, stated that she has that unique little rasp to her voice, while S2 mentions a very successful CCS with a rough sound. This is particularly surprising considering that all participants were in agreement about clarity, clear sound, and straightforward as ideal characteristics of contemporary Christian singers' voices. The way the participants described CCS voices as pop sound and Christian radio sound is consistent to previous studies that emphasize the commercial pop nature of contemporary Christian music. The participants, although suggested that classical voice training can be beneficial to CCS, but made clear that ideal CCS voices are not classically sound and should not sound as opera or an aria because it doesn't fit the genre. These statements are relevant in terms of identifying what pedagogical approach is more appropriate for training CCS and resonates with the American Association of Teachers of Singing statement that advocates for a style-specific training for CCM singers. The participants' concerns about contemporary Christian singers' vocal health were particularly interesting. All three participants seemed to see some connection between vocal health and vocal training. In our study, we identified 8 instances where there was a co-occurrence of these two codes, vocal health and training. In terms of training, the participants were not specific about what technique or pedagogical approach is more appropriate for contemporary Christian singers. We hypothesized that this occurred because the participants are primarily performers and not voice teachers and might not be familiar with voice pedagogy terminology. Although most participants spoke positively about traditional classical training, they also emphasized that the ideal vocal sound of CCS should be commercial, contemporary, and not classical. S2 did mention about speech level singing and Blaylock technique. Further research could potentially clarify if these methods have appropriate elements for training contemporary Christian singers. The participants mentioned that a good technique for contemporary Christian singers should help them sing easily, comfortably, and with freedom. The two technical aspects that with the largest occurrence were breathing and diction. Diction seems to be extremely important due to the religious nature of praise and worship style. The message seems to be of vital importance. Style appears to be another performance aspect of contemporary Christian singers that needs to be served in the main purpose of delivering the message. The participants mentioned terms such as simplicity, not a ton of licks, not distracting, not flowery, and straightforward when describing CCS voices. The participants seem to suggest that a CCS performance style should be clean, with few embellishments, and subjected to the message of the songs. Also emphasizing the importance of delivering the message for CCS performances and the congregational nature of praise and worship style, S2 stated the importance of good intonation. He mentioned that if you are singing out of tune, you might be a distraction to the congregation. Contemporary Christian singers are a subset of CCM singers. Therefore, it was not surprising that the participants suggested that CCS should feel comfortable with using microphones as sound reinforcement. The fact that the participants identified CCS sound as pop may be enough to suggest some type of microphone technique, since pop sound by its own nature is an electronically reinforced sound. Our conclusions, and I will start with weaknesses of the study. The sample size, again, in the study is too small to support generalizations. The specificity and high profile of the participants proved to be very challenging, but was an important factor because elite singers represent what the music market has selected as successful. Elite professional singers are difficult to contact and usually have busy schedules with limited openings for interviews. Their level of expertise, however, was invaluable to our research. The participants of our study are extremely representative of contemporary Christian singer style and have extensive, highly recognized and awarded careers. Our findings. Among the most relevant findings is the suggestion that contemporary Christian singers have a heavy and demanding vocal load and are at risk for vocal injury. This finding is consistent to previous studies that suggest similar issues. It is also relevant, the assessment from our participants, that contemporary Christian singers in general have little to no vocal training. Classical training, according to our participants, although beneficial, does not seem to be sufficient to fully prepare CCS for the marketplace. Therefore, contemporary Christian singers need a specific methodology or pedagogical approach. Also, according to the participants, any pedagogical approach for contemporary Christian singers should place emphasis on breath support and good diction. It is equally important for voice teachers of contemporary Christian singers to have a full understanding of praise and worship style in order to prepare contemporary Christian singers adequately. We hope that our findings will help the voice pedagogy community develop new and more effective applied voice curricula. for worship degrees in order to train contemporary Christian singers, emphasizing their specific technical and stylistic needs. We also hope that our findings will help the development of more style-appropriate private studio strategies for contemporary Christian singers. Future research for this population of singers may include analysis of worship applied voice curricula, investigation on microphone techniques, and praise and worship repertoire analysis. And to conclude this presentation, I have just a small sample and a small part of the discussion and conclusion section. Our findings suggest that contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders, although have similarities with other CCM styles, may also have unique needs. If disseminated, these preliminary results may serve to raise vocal hygiene and vocal health awareness in contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders populations, and assist voice pedagogues in the development of curricula and style-appropriate teaching strategies for contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders. There is still a great need for research in this category of singers. This dissertation is by no means a comprehensive examination of CCS and WL. The prevalence of voice disorders in our participants was concerning and deserves a deeper investigation. Worship conferences with high attendance of CCS WLs might be able to provide researchers with opportunities for random laryngoscopic health screening of singers. Additional studies should be conducted on the environmental conditions in recording studios to raise awareness in CCS about potential vocal risks. Our research revealed that worship leaders perform primarily in churches where the sound system quality may not be adequate to provide them with an appropriate voice reinforcement and monitoring of their voices. These sound systems warrant further investigation. Our data also suggests that the current voice teaching for contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders may not be the most appropriate for their needs. The analysis of current CCS WL applied lesson curricula may be able to provide further information for voice pedagogues. Vocal health and technical needs. The two overarching aspects that guided this research. CCS and WLs, although experiencing growth in popularity, are unaware of their vocal risks, and most are not being trained effectively. As I finish this 3-article dissertation, I find myself asking more questions about this population. Future studies may contribute to a new generation of healthier and more technically capable contemporary Christian singers and worship leaders. I would like just to take a minute and acknowledge my family, my daughter Anna, my wife Natalie, for their patience and support, my brilliant, amazing instructor Dr. Meyer for being so patient and for keeping a sense of humor even in the most dramatic moments. Thank you, my committee, Professor O'Neill, thank you so much for your expertise, helped me in so many instances in finding some of my participants. Thank you, Dr. Mitz. Dr. Mitz was not sure that he would be useful because he is an expert in church music, but not in contemporary Christian music. But being so thorough and all your suggestions were much appreciated. You were a vital part of this project. Professor Edwards, we researched correlated areas, and you've been extremely helpful through the whole process. I hope we can collaborate in future research soon. And I cannot forget to mention Dr. Jeanette Ogg. She's the reason for me being here. She took a chance on me when nobody else did, and I will never forget that. Thank you so much, Shenandoah Conservatory and my Liberty University family. These are the references for all 3 articles, and article by article will be easier for you to get that. And I think I'm ready for some questions if you have.